to this keynote presentation for our 8th annual, can't believe it's 8 now, 8th annual Digital Knowledge Sharing Workshop here at the Library and Museum of the American Philosophical Society. My name is Brian Carpenter. I'm the curator of Indigenous Materials here at the Library and Museum. And I'd like to note that this program is an activity of the Society's Center for Native American and Indigenous Research, for which we have nice brochures here in the back. Please pick one up if you haven't. And it's part of our Native American Scholars Initiative, which is funded by the Mellon Foundation. So I'm really glad you've joined us today, both the folks here in person and the many people I know who are joining us online for this evening's presentation by Hali Dardar. We are offering Spanish interpretation, so for those on YouTube or Zoom, there's information on how to access that. And thank you to our interpreter who is doing the good work of providing Spanish interpretation. To begin, we would like to acknowledge that the American Philosophical Society resides in Lenapehoking, which is the past, present, and ongoing homeland of the Lenape people. And the Society also recognizes that it has benefited from being an occupant of this part of Lenape land, now called Philadelphia. Out of that, through our Center for Native American and Indigenous Research, the Society seeks to promote research that honors Indigenous knowledge, cultivates scholarship, and strengthens languages and cultural traditions. And we express our sincere thanks for the past and ongoing generosity of numerous Indigenous communities and individuals who have offered guidance, expertise, and opportunities for collaborations that have made this work possible. Our center exists to make the archival collections here accessible. That's what we do. We digitize archival materials at no cost for Indigenous community research requests. Please be in touch if you're interested in getting more information. That's what we're here to do. And we have contact information in the chat, and we have some here as well. For those joining us for the first time, I'll say a little bit about the APS. The American Philosophical Society was founded by Benjamin Franklin in 1743. And of the many parts of the APS, we're here as part of the Library and Museum. And our library and museum collections and research centers serve scholars, community members, and visitors from across the globe. So check out our website, mphilsoc.org, to learn more about what we do and for news of forthcoming events. After Hali's presentation, there will be time for a Q&A. And so for those of us joining online, you can submit your questions through various means there, and we will share them during the Q&A period in person here as well. We'll integrate those into the Q&A. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce today's speaker, Hali Dardar. Hali is an enrolled member of the United Houma Nation and is co-founder of the Houma Language Project and Bvlbancha Public Access. Her works explore interaction design, new media art, and community processes. With these roles, she crafts long-term creative engagements to improve organizational processes and produce community-affirming change. She does tons of things, of which many highlights here are involved with community-based design, language revitalization, Indigenous media, memory documentation. She's been a resident artist in residence at many great places. She's done this thing called the Indigenous Gulf Streams in 2021 and 23, which is one of my favorite projects of hers that her and her colleagues have done. The Unrecognized Stories and Language Keepers interview series. She's been 2020 Southern Artist for Social Change through the National Performance Network, the Rural Performance Production Lab, and of the many on here, my favorite, probably my favorite ever artist in residency I've heard of, the 2025 Self and Universe Artist in Residence at Tulane University's Studio in the Woods. And she's led many collaborative projects, including at the Language Vitality Initiatives at Smithsonian Center for Folk Life and Cultural Heritage. She has a background in print journalism and an MA in Arts, Sculpture, and Media from University of Groningen. And I first met Hali, I think, about 7 years ago at a conference in Minnesota. And we started striking up some conversations then. And since then, we've periodically met up again, and I always learn great things from what she's doing, and she does fascinating work, as you're about to find out. So, Hali, here you go.
Thanks so much, Brian. Let's see if we can get this up. Lovely. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being here in person, and thank you for being here on the internet. We really appreciate everyone who's here today. I'm talking about time and using time, and there's a lot of different things you can use your time for today, and you've decided to use it here, and I appreciate that, and thank you. And I hope to make it worth your while. I don't know why you're here, but you are. Brian did a really great introduction, and I really appreciate talking about some of the work that I do that is community-based and archive-based, and some of like the longer research streams that I've been working on. I'm not going to talk about a lot of that today. I'm going to talk about my messes. This is a phrase. So from 2015 till probably around 2017, I worked with my grandfather to learn Houma French and kind of pass on some generational and cultural knowledge. And I laugh that this is my language acquisition rate. You know, we never did a formal grading system, but this is where I'm at. And it says, I know enough to make some trouble. Really funny. And so today is going to be a little bit more informal. I do a lot of talks about big projects that are organized with a lot of people and have like very connected protocols, and none of this stuff is that. This stuff is very different. And one of the things is in the lobby. I hoped you walked by it when you came in today. It's a big, loud painting of palmetto huts. And this is it here. I like it a lot because it's life-sized. And it's a life-size picture from the Frank Speck collection. This is an image that Frank Speck took of our community back in the 1930s. This is a thatched roof. I believe this is Victor Dardar's house. Old house is what it says in the labels. But yeah, he was very into architecture, and so he took all of these pictures. And I had this giggly dream when I go through these collections in the archives of like, what would this look like? Not in color, but absolute technicolor. Like beyond what it would look like as a realism thing, but like I want to see it large and I want to see it ridiculous. I think that, and so one day I had a few extra hours and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it. So I put it on a projector and I got some newspaper and I just made a mess. And I want you to think about in your own mind, there's probably something that you have that is a giggly dream, something that is illogical to do or doesn't connect to your research at all, but it feels like something in the back of your head. It's like, man, that would be so cool to do. And then immediately you always think like, I hope someone does it that day. I hope someone does it one time. That person is you. You should do it. And the cool thing I like about art is that it's usually a receipt of an idea. You create something, and maybe it might not be in the first part of your mind, or it may be, you know, a large connection of things that you're linking together, and you're not quite sure why. It's just a giggly instinct. But I want to talk about why it was really important for me to make this piece. And I want to talk about kind of the thought and the ideas that went behind that receipt. This piece is a collaboration. It's only possible because of CNAIR and the way that American Philosophical Society operates. They have the transparency, they have the connection that's available that allows me to easily access this piece, easily talk to their collections managers, and make something ridiculous. It's interesting to work with archival materials to do something very much in the moment, in an instant. It's difficult to react in that amount of time. And it's a very big responsibility, not a responsibility, it's a very big burden for archives to support stuff that's happening that is so ephemeral and just happens in an instant. And so I want to thank APS for making this so available. Archives at their best are a conduit that are conduiting these things that are in the past into this very present moment. At mid, they are a medium that's doing something similar. And at worst, they're a filter. So today, I want to talk to you about 3 different kind of segmenting things in puns and time. We're going to talk about 3 different segments of things that went into this dala, or the palmetto hut idea. And we're going to segment it into minutes, seconds, and hours. First is minutes. I wrestled with this section a lot because I wanted to go into very big detail about film history and the beginning of image and how this connects. And then I realized, no, you need to keep this to 1 minute. And so that's what we're going to do. These are some of the questions that I think about when I connect what I'm doing with this very ephemeral painting with what's happening within archives and that relationship that has to happen. The first question that I have, and for us all to think about, is whose values do we prioritize, explicitly or implicitly, in what we give archival attention and access to? Is it the ability to make a ridiculous painting that you've always wanted to do that has no real purpose, just because I want to do it? What is it? Why? What are we prioritizing in our access? To what extent can archives support creative access today? What is possible? That's kind of a question to think about. I want to think about archival design. Okay, Haley, keep it under a minute. Just keep it going. Sorry. And then the final question is kind of for the people who are sitting here in this room who may have a fellowship or an intern, and think about how can descendants right now use archival collections? So I want to talk about seconds. This is another photo from the collection. This one is called, this is actually Unidentified. I think it's Unidentified Girls. When I look at this photograph, I see an interesting hairstyle that I would like to try. There's like braids. It's very difficult to see here, but there's a piece of cloth that's interwoven in her braids, and then it's going in the back, and it's like tied. It's like, wow, that seems like an excellent hair solution. Unidentified Girls, 4-2-N, Frank Speck collection from the 1930s. I don't think when Frank Speck created this collection, he was thinking, I want to influence fashion. That's not what he was into. Oh, this is another picture of 2 unidentified girls who are Houma in a very different context. Gotta pull up my notes. In 1925, Frank Speck joined the American Eugenics Society, an organization interested in furthering discussion, advancement, and dissemination of knowledge about biological and sociocultural forces which affect the structure and composition of human populations. This practice included documenting and analyzing individuals' facial features to draw conclusions about their backgrounds and their futures. The pose of the girls in this photo, and also the poses of the subjects in Frank Speck Collection's photos 4-2-R, 4-9-B, number 093, number 097, number 107C, all reflect this history. I think in the first photo, you almost forget that it's 2 people. It feels like it's recreating an illustration more than it is trying to capture 2 people. And as Indigenous people who are using archival collections, our present instance of use, whether it be our research, whether it be our language reclamation, is always going to be the second use of this collection from what it was meant to do originally. How many of you guys have felt that before? I don't think Frank Speck ever thought, you know, one day a Houma girl with green jelly shoes and a sunshine t-shirt is gonna come here and get hair advice from the photos I made. This is why we're keeping these images. So I want to talk about two things about that statement. The first is that the palmetto being used for a hut is also a second use. Just because something was made and created and crafted for a certain reason doesn't mean that it cannot be a shelter or a use or a tool to be used for something else. And the second question is going to archivists or people who are involved in archival institutions and thinking about how can archives support people who are doing these second uses of these materials that are within their collections. I have 3 opinions on that, and I'm going to give you all 3 of them. The first is making sure that you're designing empathetic processes. I have a Q to R tag at the end of this, and it's going to give all the links to all of the things that I'm mentioning today. But shout out to the Smithsonian National Anthropological Archive, Gina Rappaport, Dejin Juko, and Kirby Ewald, as they supported me in creating this article, describing the personal and emotional aspects of accessing a collection. So I wrote this article just really talking about what it is emotionally to be in a reading room and using things for a second use. I want to read out a little piece of that. I wish there was more room for these feelings in archival planning. Sometimes it feels like the entire archive experience is designed to provide a comically isolated experience. The rooms are organized for silence and complete public view. Visitors stifle the sounds of paper, gently cough with great hesitance, and live out core memories of elation, sorrow, and the depths of cultural loss in a public archive reading rooms across the world. I know I'm not the only one who has quietly cried in the reading room and worried if my grief and tears were too disruptive. How would the design of an archival access change if there was a focus on visitors connecting with their living peers? The next thing that I want to talk about is why things are in archives, or how do we design things in perpetuity so community members have constant access to those materials or constant ownership beyond stewardship. I'm just going to play this video. We've been working on this project called the UK contracting system, and it's really rethinking what it is to do an oral history interview and who gets the rights to that. So I'm just going to play the video. The audio in this video is terrible. We have the mic on the table, so it makes this drum with no beat. It's terrible. So it'll play in the next slide. But interview contracting, which reduces knowledge extraction, this idea that you can create a process that helps individuals keep what they have. Let's see if we can play this. This is a shout out to Colleen Billiot. I was interviewing her for the project. She's the co-founder of the Home Language Project. Yeah, so the way that we do interviews for this project is a little bit different. So I'm going to explain it to you from the top. So what we're trying to do with this project is trying to understand why is it that people, whenever things change from oral history to digital history, that there's an intellectual property change. So like, to me it feels like if you were going to take a VHS and copy it into digital, that wouldn't mean that you have the intellectual property rights to that video. And so what we're trying to question is, why is it that when oral history and oral knowledge gets transferred into digital knowledge, that there is a transfer of copyright information? So what you're looking at in front of you are 2 documents that are trying to combat this, or coming up with a solution of how we can maintain intellectual property rights for knowledge holders. So within these two systems, the first document that you're looking for at is a work for hire agreement. This is very similar to like if you went to a department store and got your photo taken, you would sign something similar to this. What this means is that you are hiring me to put on this interview for you. What that does is that it securely puts the copyright ownership of this material that you're creating in your hands. So you are the owner of it. I have no, I'm just work for hire in this. You can keep this, you're gonna keep this document, and that just means for time immemorial, this interview will belong to you.
Okay.
The second document is a copyright license agreement. So that's saying that, that I am requesting limited use of the material that you have a copyright of. That use is going to be for the Language Keeper project in this instance. So there's like a paragraph here that talks about like what that use is, which is going on the YouTube for the Language Keeper website.
Okay.
It also says that, it also puts a compensation on it. This is a free interview, so you're giving me a license of $0. You're welcome to put other amounts if you want, but I'd really appreciate if it was free this time. And so this allows you to license this material to me. This license is revocable, so if you don't feel like comfortable with the way that I'm using things, you can revoke the license. It also doesn't change the copyright. So because you have this copyright, you can sell multiple licenses. This is not an exclusive license. So if someone else comes to you and wants the material from this interview, you can sell it to them or you can give it to them, and you're in complete control on who gets it and what's happening to that.
Okay. Quick question. So in terms of Language Keeper interface,
And then the video goes on into another detail of things that we don't get into today. So this is a different way to look at, rather than, having, interviewers or fellows or researchers own these materials. What happens when the interviewees themselves have complete control and perpetuity and can choose whether or not this information is extracted and how? The final one is designing proximity. This is a project that we are working on. Actually, I should start by saying this is a mess. It's not really a mess, but this is a project that has gone into like multiple iterations. So in this section of slides, I'm just going to be talking about the dream of it, and then when we're getting into the hours section, we're gonna revisit this project. But the dream of this project was really to reconsider what we're doing when we're creating a finding aid. A finding aid is a document that is a roadmap through a collection. But I wanted to not necessarily reconsider the content of the finding aid, but also try to think about the form of the finding aid. Is a PDF embedded within an archival website really accessible for community members? It may be accessible, but is it relational? And so I started to think about what is a relational way to start thinking about these materials to get them out. And so I had this idea of like, let's make a zine. Let's just make something that's very cheap, very similar to a finding aid, but instead of having in our mindset, we're trying to make an index, have in our mindset is we're trying to make a community readable document to share an idea, and that idea is where to find things. So this is a picture, the bottom picture is an image of another zine that we made for another project that kind of spurred this idea of like, what if we took all of the information from 3 different collections on the Houma and put it together into a single zine? It didn't end up happening. What ended up happening was, that project grew and someone was like, that's a great idea. Shout out to Dana Kress and Centenary Press along with Athena Vasquez. And they approached me with the idea of changing the zine project into a book project and thinking about how can we get this selection of 3 different collections of Houma materials, combine all of those finding aids together into a visual aid that community members can use to better understand and access and interface with archives and collections on materials. I also want to say with this a shout out to, again, Brian Carpenter for being about this idea and supporting most of the projects that are on this screen. along with the rest of the CMNAR team, and then also the team at National Anthropological Archives and the team at the Rensselaer Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage Archives. And then also, was funded by a Monroe Fellowship grant through Tulane University's Center for the Gulf South, RIP, Center of the Gulf South. But all that to say, this is kind of the form that we decided on. It's the same content that's in a finding aid, but it's very differently designed. First of all, we're titling things by the call number. We want to be able to make sure that people are able to easily interface with archivists if they want to understand more about the collection. And even though sometimes the verbal title is much more contextually interesting to the community, this document is meant to be a translation document. So we want to make sure that people are pointed towards using call numbers. I'm going to go a little bit more into the rest of the sections in the next part. But I want to also note this kind of landscape layout. We decided on the metaphor of a family photo book. How do we, we're thinking about a photo album where you open a page, you slide in a 4x6 image, and then maybe you write some notes in the margin of it. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we get this index material to feel like a family photo book. And we did a lot of tests with that. There was a week, I took a few different designs of possible book forms, and I ended up just cutting a centimeter off of each design to see how different things felt. If you just took a centimeter off landscape versus a centimeter off the width, to think about, is there any difference that we can make people feel when they're holding these books? And there was a delightful week where I ran around in any social gathering I went to. I had these cardboard books, and I didn't tell anyone. I was like, hold these and tell me what you think, with no context. It was a fun party game. Everyone enjoyed it. And one of the things that I asked is I would write down what people said, these one-word responses for each one of the books, and it was fun. These are some of the responses of the winning form. Second best, someone didn't like it. Resilient, chunky, easy, life-changing, accessible. So, I just wanted to impart that the form that we are delivering things in, even if it's centimeters off on each side, really gives a different feel and idea or concept of what people are holding or doing. Finally, I want to talk about hours. This is a pun. We're talking about time, but we're also talking about ownership. How do we feel and how do we work when Indigenous researchers are using the material as if it is ours? The first thing that I did when I think about things in this way is that I began to insert my own perspective. So we're coming back to these books. I think one of the things that I highlighted is our need not necessarily to know what the collection is, but to be able to have a better translation or conversation with the owners or the stewards of these collections. So rather than having the text title as the largest piece on the page, we decided to go with the call number because that is the item that is the most transmissible information between the two systems. The second choice that we made was not to try to curate the information that we found about the archives. So, for example, on this collection item, this is from the Swantons, John R. Swanton's collection at the National Anthropological Archive. This is a cross bayou. This is a cross intersection, a boat intersection in Lafourche, Paris. We have information that is listed on the finding aid. So that's that first section. But I've also added, ooh, wow, that gets louder when I get closer, I'm sorry. Sorry if I've been whispering, guys. But I've also included the information on the back of the photo. Yes, this information is usually very similar. Yes, usually the back of the photo information is absolutely more chaotic. But by including that, I've also not included doubt. I've also not included questions on what could possibly be there. It's given people a better understanding of the process and what goes into making something as as complete as a set of information about a document. So I've found it very interesting that there is sometimes a bit of difference between what's in the finding aid and what's on the back of the photo. Most of the time, the finding aid has done God's work of making it a little bit more accessible. But sometimes the mistakes and the errors that are on the back of the photo tell you some very core interesting things about who the researcher is and what they know. For example, they might not know how to spell Lafourche. That's an interesting fact to know about the person who took the photograph. Lafourche is a place. So. And finally, how much time do I have to go on this rant? Okay, hold on, guys. I have some thoughts about this. The next one is I wanted to put a section where I got to put my own information. I didn't want this section to be connected to the information that was on collection notes because I wanted to make sure that I could insert my opinion. So I put a few different things in this section called researcher notes. For example, sometimes I see a face in one photo that looks like this same face in another photo. I'll put some of those links, like, hey, this looks like the same person that's in 4-2-M, just to give people some information about some context. But the other thing that I'm adding is what I like to call tags. One of the projects that I work on is the Houma Language Project. It's a language reclamation project where we're trying to reconstruct and revitalize the language of the Houma people in South Louisiana. And with that project, I thought, what if I assigned a word to each one of these images? And so I went through the whole collection, and I thought about this image, and I assigned a word to it. And now we're going to print a word connected to that image. And at first, it was just a way to express language. But that wasn't enough to get me through tagging 300 images. So somewhere around the process of doing this, I realized that there was something else here. That everyone else who had gone through these collections were probably not Houma. And that this might be the only time a Houma person has ever contextualized these images. And the idea that the rest of the metadata on the page is coming from external from the community. And this is the part that's coming internal. It also made me think about technology. I was recently at a conference and heard about a state-level archive who got a $3 million grant to have an artificial intelligence system go through all of their images. They would train the process and tag all of those images to make them easier to find for future researchers. I was conflicted about that, particularly because if you gave the indigenous community represented in those images $3 million to go through and tag things, what more could we do for humanity rather than training a piece of technology to do something? To me, it feels like building a dog park whenever children don't have a place to play. And so this tagging process of me going through and doing this individually has also become an expression of that. Brian called it. I was going to talk about the Gulf Stream, and you knew I would. This is one of my favorite projects. It was a COVID project, as a lot of great things were. Just to give a shout out to it, this is a new media biennial, so it happens every 2 years. It's free and open to the public, and it will be happening on November 9th, which is a Sunday of this year. The goal of this is to establish relationships around Gulf South, the indigenous community, from different thinkers and doers, and do it around art and media, and thinking about how to do that with a digital procession. So every 2 years, we create and curate 24 hours of indigenous media that has been created within the 2 years. It's our way of occupying space. We have no, with the projects that I work on, the Houma Language Project and Bvlbancha Public Access, both of them are digital projects, and they have no physical space. It's very complicated to own and have physical space. And so Rather than trying to occupy land, we decided to try to occupy our time. And so that's how we came up with creating this 24-hour stream. It's become a time monument to the contemporary existence of Indigenous people within the Gulf South. All of the material on it, again, is stuff that's been created within the last 2 years. Sometimes it's interviews. We sponsor artists to create commissions for the projects. And we also take very interesting social media things that people do. It's become this kind of festival and this place where people know if they have a digital creative expression, that there's a place for it to be beyond just its giggly dream. This is the trailer from the 2023. It's important to note that all of the material from the Indigenous Gulf Stream, okay, sorry, I have to give my shout outs. Shout out to the Mellon Foundation Humanities in Place, who has generously funded the 2025 Indigenous Gulf Stream, which was really great. And shout out to the National Performance Network for supporting the first 2 versions. Also shout out to the Indigenous Gulf Stream production team, which is Ida Aronson, Jean-Luc Perit, Cynthia Russell, and Jenna May. This is an image from, so I'll play the trailer from the 2023 Indigenous Gulf Stream. An important thing to note is that all of the content from the Indigenous Gulf Stream also goes through the UK contracting system. So we have limited licenses to use the material on the stream, but we also are making it fully, artists and interviewers still own their material, and we relicense it for other activities, which I'll talk about in a second. But. All right, Todd, we got this one. Let's see.
Hahane, hahane, haya o haya, hahane, hahane, haya o haya. Ishang hoka Bvlbancha, Ishang hoka mayon. Peni katol pistache, Laki kankam ish, Ishaki kokiti ish, Oti akon lupak pelan. Yaki kanti peltukov, Otiwe anungosh, Otiwe anungosh, Konkana shiwaki, Simaku tuktukao.
So be on the lookout. It's coming to a Twitch stream near you. It's also free. It's going to be streamed, so it'll be out there.
Hahane, hahane.
Okay, great. And as I mentioned, we are creating this material and we're collecting it as Bvlbancha Public Access to create this new media monument every 2 years. But another thing that's happening within that process is we're connecting with relationships, and we're also connecting with creators to get a better sense of the expanse of Indigenous creativity that's happening in the region. And because of that, we were approached by an architecture firm, Colocate. Shout out to Colocate. They're located in New Orleans. The people we're working with that is Brian Lee, Brian Badshaw, Amina Massey, and then on the Bvlbancha Public Access team, it's myself and Jonathan Zaraga. And they approached us with this architectural installation that they're trying to do in a public space within New Orleans. It's called the New Orleans Greenway, Lafitte Greenway. They're trying to make a portal through history that's also a shade-covered bridge. And so what we proposed, so they want to make these individual tiles that would cover the expanse of the bridge and have those tiles tell a story. Bvlbancha Public Access proposed that we could use content of the Indigenous Gulf South as something to expand upon to create that linear story. So this is kind of a very rough mess of what I actually sent this to the architecture firm in a bold move. I didn't think they'd actually respond to us. I was like, this is what we want to do. This is all made in PowerPoint. It was a mess. And they were like, yeah, okay. I was like, okay, thanks guys. So you can be messy. But yeah, so this is kind of our concept of what we would like the bridge to feel like. We want to represent the land, the sky, and the plants. And we have those covering or occupying the top and very bottom sections of the piece. ensconcing that, we're hoping to put the archival collections. So I've been in contact with Brian Carpenter and also Daisy Njugo at NAA to get licenses to use those materials on the structure to show some of the history. We're using the Frank Speck materials from both the Houma collection, and we're also working with the Tunica Language Revitalization Program to put materials from the Tunica tribe there too. And then from there, we're going to start to shift between what has happened in the past to what is happening in the current. We're using the metaphor of a river, so this idea of current and the Indigenous Gulf Stream are both playing into kind of this linear vertical line that people travel through when they go through the space. And that center area is going to be all of the material content that has been created in the 2021 and 2023 Gulf Stream. We're relicensing those materials from the original artists. They're getting repaid for those materials to be used again within the sculpture. Another thing I want to highlight about this is that this sculpture also puts together some of what we've been doing about designing interactions around within contractual policy. This sculpture itself is going to be on the Greenway for 10 years. That's the license that they have. We've negotiated and discussed as a group with Colocate, and all of the material that we're licensing for this project will be licensed for 5 years. At that point, the individuals have a choice on whether or not they want their material to stay or not. They can back out of the project. I mean, they can revoke any time if they wish, but they could completely take their materials down after 5 years with no hassle. But we also wanted to cantilever this idea of keeping things in the moment. 5 years from now, what looks like community access and what looks like current is going to be very different than what it is today. And so we wanted to make room to make sure that material and space is going to be covered. It puts Colocate at a very large risk. They're creating a sculpture. They have funding to do project for 10 years, and they're using that funding for 5 years. And so we're working together as a relationship between Colocate and Bvlbancha Public Access to try to find ways or find funding to take that project and make the next 5 years happen. So I hope that gives you a little bit of some ideas of inspiration of different ways to use your time. I think with all of these projects, even the one that happened in an instant, all of them grew. Nothing happened overnight. It took a while for me to get my ideas together, to get that instant of like, I want to do this tonight. It took a very long time for Frank Speck to gain the trust and gain the access to be able to even take that photo. It's taken a while for the APS team to care for and steward that photo from all these years. And then finally, it took a long time for the plant to actually grow that leaf. And that's why I want to say, you know, all of this work is because we have time. Using time requires us to have time. I think of a lot of reasons why things aren't happening in the way that we want them to is because we don't have enough time. I would like to see us use the same erudition of land back and start thinking about time back. How much has our time been colonized in a way that keeps us from doing the things that need to be done or has been extracted from where we are? Thank you.
We have time for questions.
I have two questions. One of which is, how successful have you been in encouraging people to tell their stories when they're looking at a video camera? And also, how much attention do you pay to the quality of the video and the microphones?
So I think for your first question is like how do I gain trust through to the process of interviews? I think my first instinct, there's so many ways I could go. First is that I think I like doing it. So I like listening to people. I enjoy listening to people, and so that helps. The second thing is that I don't really do it anymore. My role now is more of collecting media from people, rather than trying to catch, trying to collect information from people. We try to work with people who want to talk to us and are looking for an outlet for it. So usually people come to us with a story or come to us with something that they want to be recorded because they know we can do that. And then we facilitate that through commission processes or through just recording them. And then your second question was quality of equipment. We, as you can see by the video we did earlier, it varies. And I think that goes into, I could go down some rabbit holes with that one. But I think what I decided in media studies is that there's two ways to approach things. You can focus on the quality of things, or you can focus on the depth. To use the metaphor, you can either be a scuba diver or you could be a pearl diver. You can be someone who's entering an environment with all of the best quality material and who is able to stay a long time, but may still be mediated in the way that you're interfacing. Or you can dive and immerse directly within the material. Maybe you don't have all the equipment and maybe it's a little bit risky and you can't stay down as long, but you're better in direct contact. And so that's my personal philosophy when it comes to interviewing or being in situations of gaining stories. I would prefer to be a pearl diver rather than a scuba diver. We have equipment available for that, and we have training, and so if people want to make high quality things, it's available for them to do that. But we're finding that most people are not trying to make things for archives. They're trying to make things for their own oral history collections or their own community knowledge networks. And that works better with in-the-moment recording. I have a lot more to say. Love to talk about that.
Thank you, Haley. What I was thinking about how to phrase this question in a non-clumsy way, but the last thing you just said might be a good way to connect what I'm thinking about. So you were just saying here with the interviews, with people who are creating it, both in this case, both the interviewers and interviewees, you kind of have a common shared goal of creating a resource that's going to be important for now and for the future. And so you're kind of envisioning a future use also. Mm-hmm. This ties back to what you're talking about the second uses you're making of things like the spec things. So that is a really good point. I'm wondering if, this is based on hearing over the years things we've heard community members from various communities say about their observations about archival materials, is if, there are obviously unintended, the uses that community members are making of materials are almost always not the intended or envisioned uses that the original outside person could have imagined. But are there sort of implicit or discernible uses that the indigenous participants in that archival thing might have is it possible to see what they might have envisioned as the future possibilities of this thing that they're participating in creating?
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it, and I think you're right. When I think, because for this particular Frank Speck collection that's at the APS, not only do we have photographs, but we also have correspondence. So some of the people who are displayed within the photos sent more materials over to Frank Speck during his research collection, and those letters are also within the collection. A part of my Gulf Stream 2023 personal submission, I would like to take those letters and make them into an audio piece, because there's something really beautiful about those. And I think when I go through and read those letters, there's the feeling of urgency, of that someone wants something and needs something, and I'm trying to give it to them. There's another feeling of awe, of visibility, of this person who is coming from this prestigious institution and has an interest in me. And so that's another feeling that I'm reading in some of these letters. But both of those, I would agree with Brian, are ranked less than this idea that this is being kept. When I'm reading through the letters of David Billiot, I'm reading a person who knows that what they're doing here is going to be out of the hurricane zone in the next few years. So yes, I think that there is that Indigenous collaboration with the work we're doing.
Thank you so much. This was so amazing. I wanted to hear more about the book project. So when you carried around your physical items at parties and made people hold them and ask for their input as book people, we're very into books, and I would love to hold your books, although I'm not the target audience. But I also love the idea of taking knowledge that's from your community and sort of taking it out of the artificial construct of, an archive, essentially, which has a very codified way of dealing with information, and making it feel like family again in an album-type structure. Since so much of your work is digitally focused, do you envision this being a literal physical book at some point, or how are people going to be able to interact with this re-envisioned finding aid? That just blew my mind. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, I would love to. We didn't even use the term book when we were passing this around because we didn't want people to have any preconceived understanding. So we just called it a form. And so it was, New Orleans is the place where you can do this, where I just went around, and if I'd show up at a party, I'd be like, oh, would you mind holding these forms and telling me what you think of them? And I would highly recommend you do that if you feel socially awkward and need something to do at a party. It's very interesting. And also people got very into the project after. They're like, what are you doing? Tell me more. And then your second question, man, I always forget questions when there's multiple ones. Yeah, the digital versus physical aspect of things. I think because of the work, most of my work is very digital, and then most of the work that's happening within the Houma Language Project Collective and the Bvlbancha Public Access Collective are both incredibly digital. And our moms are wondering what we're doing, and so are our grandparents. And so there's this divide that's happening that's part of the reason why we're trying to step into this physical space, is there's so much information available if people are willing to are able to take the steps to get on and surf with us. And I think we've collected all of the radical people that are ready to do that. And none of them that's not all of the community. And so I think that's the moment where we decided we need to be doing physical forms of things. I think that you're less able to be in the exact present moment when you're creating something because you have to plan it. But I think that this is a stretch that we need to do in order to translate and be relevant or interact and communicate and have a relationship with the whole audience.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I wanted to ask you a question that ties together two of the words that you discussed with us tonight. One is conduit, and the other is secondary. And the reason I'm asking is, in some ways, the way I heard this framed is that there is the primary use, the initial use of somebody who's creating an object, a document, an image. And then there's the secondary use, the creative or reimagined use that you've been discussing, and archives are the conduit. But I'm wondering if archives aren't actually the secondary use, and what then is developed thereafter, a tertiary use. And the reason I ask is that archives really, to me, we're increasingly recognizing that they are active agents. We are active agents in good ways and in bad ways in thinking about what we collect, what we steward, how we make it available. We reshape the material that we bring in, just as you also reshape material that we hold and steward.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds with clarity. And I think that when you say that, it makes me think that it's the same giggly joy that I felt when making this, but spread over a 200-year span. Whereas what I'm doing is really focusing on a moment. What you guys are doing is applying that same joy and passion over a perpetuity of time. I had some slides that I took out. I've been rumbling back and forth with time. That's funny. But like, I think that it is very similar, and I think that when we look at things from the perspective in art and media, we're taking this vast expanse of the field of archiving and the great value it's bringing to the world, and just looking at it from the skinny side. And that's when it becomes a filter rather than an expanse. So yes, I do agree that it is the same, and this is just looking at that same thing from a different point of view.
We have time for one more question.
Thank you. I'm concerned about the identity being stolen when you do all this stuff here, and that won't be changed after you get it done in the archives, and that's one to guarantee that the people in the community want to realize that here be what's the name and stuff of the people be the same 20 and 30 years ago.
So the question is, how do we ensure that we know that the identity of the person in the photo is actually the person like years back? That's a trust fall, man. That's been a big question on our side too. One of the things that I did with the Frank Speck collection is that we have this annual gathering called Tasso Time that we're starting. It happens in March, and it's a place where we're doing culture and community connections. And so I made a printout, a literal family photo album of all of the pictures from both of the collections, and brought them there. And then put them all on a table. The community immediately came out, and they started with, people started writing with permanent markers on the back of the photos their notes, which were very different than the notes that Swanton and Reed and Speck were putting on the back of them. And so in those moments, we had a few places of affirmation where we were able to reconfirm some people. But no, yeah, things get lost all of the time, and we don't have the names. Even when these people were writing this information down the first time, a lot of people aren't named. Actually, I was in the reading room today. I was talking earlier where I finally read the back of a photo that I had missed the first time, and someone was named, and it was like, oh, that's Michelle Verde. And then it was like 4 other pictures that I know within that same collection. Now I can see and be like, oh, that's the name of that person. I can put names on 5 other images. And also, they also said that this is the daughter. And then it was like, oh, if that's the daughter, then I can put this in 5 other locations that I now have a tag on. So yeah, it's wild, and it's a trust fall. You have to know that these people originally spelled last names right, knew who they were, weren't confused. You have to trust.
But from now, when you do the paperwork and stuff and send it to the archive, and everything like it's supposed to be done, is the community say, well, we won't make sure that the name stay there, that won't get changed and stuff like that, intellectual property.
Yeah, making sure that does happen, and that's part of the great work that APS does.
Well, pun not intended, but we are out of time. But I would like to have #TimeBack is a great takeaway for all of us. But thank you very much, Hali, and thank you everyone who was here and for your questions.